You mentioned women seeking a mate, that embodies the best that she can. How does she know if she has the right partner? Because not everyone's going to find.
Well, she doesn't.
She doesn't,
and she would never will. You know.
So how does that work?
It's doomed to failure.
Those numbers don't match up right now. Most women will pick a few men, and not the rest of the men on Tinder, for example. Right? That's
Yeah, right. They're very selective.
So, and which makes sense. You're looking for the best person to mate with you, to bond with you, to be your companion. How do women make those choices wisely? What happens to men who aren't picked? How do you change that dynamic? Because judgment is, you can say whatever you want to say about judgment, but it's used every single day when people pick their relationships.
I don't think you can change it in its essence. I mean, if you're constantly rejected by women, there's something wrong with you. And that's how it is.
Wow.
And no wonder men get so angry at that. No wonder, because it's a profound rejection. It's like, no, I'm rejecting your essence. And why do women do that? Well, they're smart and self-conscious, and they know both rationally, emotionally, and instinctively that they will bear a terrible burden in pregnancy and childbearing, and child rearing for that matter, that they will become dependent to some degree on this person they're having sexual relations with. And so they better get it right. And so, they're choosy. And how would you want it to be any different? You're pretty happy that your mother chose the best man she could manage to have you. I mean, so you're subject to the same process. And it can be a terrible thing if you're continually rejected, to think, oh my God, there's something so wrong with me that every single woman I meet deems me unworthy. God, it's no wonder that makes people so angry. And it accounts for so much of the hostility between the sexes. It's a terrible thing, but how would you change it to make it better?
Well, how does the individual male change it, or at least reduce the pitfalls that are making him undesirable?
Well, I think partly what you do is you look at people who seem to be desirable, and then you see, well, how could I incrementally change myself so that I'm more like that? A little stronger, a little more fit, a little more educated, a little more charming, a little more socially skilled, a little more compassionate, all of that. And you take it as a lesson. And you don't hide. And no wonder you want to hide. I mean, I think women underestimate the degree to which men are terrified by female rejection.
Oh my goodness. Well, we're seeing it now with incels, and groups are now coalescing around the fact they think the system's broken because they're not being selected, which I completely get. I suspect many human wars were created or caused because of massive problems with too many males looking for too few females.
Yeah, well, that's a specter looming in China.
Yeah.
Because of the one-child policy and its consequences, and more female babies were terminated than males. So, yeah, that's a problem. I mean, there's no rejection like being rejected by a woman that you're, what would you say, you're captivated by.
So what do you do if you're in a stale relationship? If you're fearful that you've run into a dead end, are those rehabable?
Well, the first thing, I've been married for 30 years, 32 years, and I've known my wife for 50 years, a long time. I don't know her.
What do you mean?
She's complicated. And so if you're bored of your partner, it's like, no, you're bored with your image of your partner. Your partner has got way more to them than you'll ever know. And if you don't see that, then that's a limitation of the memory through which you're viewing your partner. Now, you may have both fallen into that trap and perpetuate it because you just act out each other's stereotypes or something like that. And then you also have to ask yourself, well, have you really asked for what you want in the relationship? Sexually, for example. This is a private story. I don't know if I should relate it, but many years ago, I stumbled across this lingerie site, trashy.com. And
sounds good.
Yeah, it's an LA outfit, and I bought like 300 pieces of lingerie. Not for me.
Yes,
I wasn't dressing up in my bedroom in this. And I thought, well, I'd like to see my wife in some of those. And so that was a really good purchase. That was really good.
Tammy put it on with the different outfits?
Yes.
Good.
And so then she's a little different, but but it's not a different woman, it's a different aspect of the same woman, and it's a game, and so we learned to play that game, and that was really helpful. That helped sustain us through our terrible illnesses, that practice, because we had set dates, and we've started doing that 20 years ago, and we set aside a time for romance, because don't you want that? And so if you're bored, it's like, well, why? What do you want? What do you want to rectify that boredom and then dare you ask for it? And is there some way you could entice your partner into participating? Maybe they're bored too, maybe for the same reasons. Maybe you're too, what would you say, moralistic and in a narrow sort of sense and feel that sort of thing is wrong in some deep sense, because we all suffer from sexual shame for all sorts of reasons, and have a little daring and see if you can get what you want, and see if you can even admit to yourself what you want, and then separate out what you shouldn't want, maybe from what would be okay to explore. And so boredom is perhaps a consequence of lack of daring, and it's certainly a consequence, at least in part, of lack of honesty. And then there's an authoritarian element to it too, because you think you know who you're dealing with. You can fall into a rut, and like I said, then you act out each other's stereotypes, and that gets dull. But part of what you do to maintain a relationship is to continually allow the mystery of your partner to be revealed, and to encourage them also, right, to change. And then men do strange things to women in that regard too, because like let's say you've managed to marry someone a bit out of your league, so you were successful, right? So, at least as far as you're concerned, and this woman is an attractive woman, but when she presents herself as attractive, other men attend to her, and so, then every time she puts on a dress or something that's attractive, instead of thinking, oh my God, what a bombshell, aren't I lucky, more of that, you frown or you turn away, or maybe you make a bit of a disgust face or something. Just a microsecond of that, you make a bit of a disgust face, and she's all not happy about that because she put a lot of effort into buying this dress and putting herself together, and now you've indicated that there's something corrupt and untrustworthy about her attempts. And you do that 50 times, and well, then she's frumpy and old, because that's what you wanted, you idiot. Because you're jealous and resentful and stupid. And so maybe there's some of that going on too. If you cultivate that sexual charisma in your wife, well, you risk other people being attracted to her. But, well, then I guess your job is to put yourself together so she still thinks you're, worthy of that.
That's the greatest compliment. If other people find the person that you were able to trap into marrying you attractive, I would think you'd celebrate that.
Yeah, well, but people are doubtful and insecure, and it's understandable, but it's not a good... Look, do not punish what you wish to have happen. So this is a really good piece of advice. This is something I learned in my clinical practice. So, okay, you want to improve your marriage, okay? And so what do? Well, you start watching, start paying attention now. You watch your wife and your kids too, and when they do something that you would really like them to do more of, because you notice, oh, I like that was good, some subtle thing, you say, hey, you just did this, and you make it specific. You just did this, and I noticed it. I really thought that was great. And you do that 100 times. This isn't that many times. Then those 100 things will happen over and over. That's positive reinforcement. B.F. Skinner, the famous behaviorist, he trained animals to do all sorts of strange things, like rats to climb ladders and so forth, and pigeons to peck out locations on maps for guided missiles. Pigeons, using photographs, using positive reinforcement. You watch, and then when the person does something you'd like to see more of, you say, that was great, and you mean it. And you admit to yourself that that's what you want, and you get over your resentment at the person for being flawed even more than you are, you think, but you're wrong. And you overcome that so that you can say something nice to them without it having like a bitter edge. And it's hard, but think about watch and see what it is that you want. And when it happens, celebrate it a little bit, and then you'll get a bunch more of it. And that'll keep the boredom out of your relationship.
So let me ask the more extreme question. Sexless relationships.
Yeah.
Statistically, people who are more intimate seem to do better. Mm-hmm. They definitely seem to live longer.
They're probably healthier, a lot of them.
That's why they can be intimate.
Yeah, yeah.
But let's leave out the physical impediment to being sexually active.
Yeah.
What happens when a relationship sexual energy dries up?
Well, that's part of that happens with being older, of course, and that is reflective in some sense of health and also the relationship between sexuality and reproduction.
25% of octogenarians are very sexually active.
Right.
So that means it's not rare. And
Right.
what happened to everybody else?
Well, there is variability in desire, and you see that, I think, fairly standardly between men and women. There's an old Woody Allen joke where the two in the couple are both in therapy, and the woman says, he wants sex all the time, at least 3 times a week. And he goes in and says, well, we never have sex, it's only 3 times a week. And that was pretty funny and pretty accurate. So
psychologists.
Right. So there's variability in sexual desire, that's for sure, and lots of variability. So you get 2 people who have a lower libido, they're not going to have intimate relationships.
Is that a problem,
as
though?
much.
If you're not, it's not about blame, it's just about the clinical reality. If a couple comes to see you and they're not being intimate.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, it's often a marker of something that's gone profoundly wrong. Yes, and often something deep. I mean, you have the idea, well, that there's variability in mind, and maybe this couple's mismatched in terms of their intrinsic libido, their desire. But yes, if they're not being intimate, usually that's a decision on the part of the woman, but not always. And yeah, it's generally indicative that something way down in the relationship is really not right. Yes. It's not a blanket statement because there's lots of variability in couples and individuals, but it's certainly something worth investigating. Why aren't you sleeping with him? Well, I hate him. and
Expound.
Well, why? And that's something to think about too. Why are you mad? Well, you don't really know. Lots of times we're in bad moods because we don't know. We don't know why we're bad. Write down everything you might be mad about.
The male-female energy that historically guided a lot of our behaviors. It was the yin-yang. Mm-hmm. I just wrote a book about traditional Chinese medicine, a topic that was hidden for many years because Mao and the earlier Chinese communist leaders didn't want it out there. They were shamed by these older traditions.
Yeah.
Now it's become more popular to talk about because it's part of the heritage of the country. Mm-hmm. But very much of yin-yang is about the opposite energies attracting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and also chaos. That's the black paisley in the Taoist yin-yang symbol. Chaos, an excess of chaos is an excess of psychophysiological stress. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing, and so if your household is chaotic, for example, it's messy, and all the pathways are cluttered. Every time you look at one of those paths, you become stressed because the pathway isn't clear. And one of the functions of the stress response is to react to unclear pathways. And so if you go into someone's house and it's chaotic, then you can say, well, you're more prone to become ill. And that's actually literally true because they're more stressed, and stress suppresses immunological function. And so there's lots of wisdom in that. Getting the balance between order and chaos correct, that's where meaning is, on that line between chaos and order. And to exist there is definitely to be more healthy. And that's speaking purely empirically, purely scientifically. It's just that scientists didn't really understand what the interplay of chaos and order meant. It's entropy, the disorder, too much entropy. We can't tolerate that. We break down physically.
But you've spoken often of order and disorder in terms of masculine and feminine energies. And one person can have both. But in our modern discussions, certainly over the last decade, there's been a blurring of male-female separations. At least it's not as clear when you look at it from the outside. How does that play into relationships?
Well, it depends on the relationship, and there are obviously biological differences between men and women, obviously, but then on top of that, there's temperament, and some women clearly have masculine temperaments, and some men clearly have feminine temperaments. So the idea that there's gender as well as sex has some validity, even speaking scientifically. So basically, men and women are about the same in conscientiousness, although women are slightly more orderly and men are slightly more industrious. Those two together make up conscientiousness. Extroversion, about the same, but women are more enthusiastic, part of extroversion, and men are more assertive. Mm-hmm. Agreeableness, that's where a big sex difference exists. Yeah. Women are more compassionate and polite than men by quite a bit. And that's not massive. The sexes still overlap more than they differ, but That's where one of the bigger differences is. And in the tendency for negative emotion, neuroticism, that's withdrawal and volatility. Women are more sensitive to negative emotion. Well, why? Well, they're smaller. So in some sense, the world is more dangerous. But I think more importantly, women are more susceptible to threat, more sensitive to threat, because I don't think adult female nervous systems are adapted for single adult females. I think they're adapted to mother-child dyads. And the reason I think that in part is that boys and girls are about the same in negative emotion. But when puberty hits, the sexes differentiate and women become more sensitive to negative emotion. Well, why? Well, if you aren't you, but you are you and an infant, the world is a way more dangerous place, and you need to be more sensitive to threat. And that's hard because that threat sensitivity, that neuroticism, negative emotionality, does make for difficulties in relationship, because smaller things will upset women on average than men. And I explained why, and that's not a criticism. It's not a criticism, but you know, every advantage comes with a disadvantage, but it's something for people to be aware of. And it's something to take seriously. It's also partly why I think it's 75% of divorces are initiated by women. Well, they get more unhappy in the same situation. And so men think, oh, women, they're hard to please. You know, they're always upset. Well, yeah, but look what they have to contend with. Well, you, for example.
Exactly. Top of the pack.
Yeah, exactly.